Oftentimes, there are many possible solutions to a problem, or many possible ways that we could leverage an opportunity. However, that doesn't mean that they are all practical. Here, let's say that we have a wide variety of solutions, 10 in total that we can choose from. However, once we begin to scrutinize these a little more closely, we see that some options fall by the wayside pretty quickly. For example, B, H, and D in this example would not be considered operationally feasible because we just don't know how to implement them, even if it would be possible theoretically. In addition, G and J would not be considered technically feasible given the equipment we currently have or could reasonably get access to. Just the same, we would need to knock off several more when it comes to cost effectiveness. While these could potentially solve the problem, the cost would be greater than the benefit, and therefore not worth pursuing. If we worry about which ones are timely and would allow us to solve an issue very quickly, then we see that we're actually only left with one solution in this case. So while there were 10 that might have been possible, only one passed all of the tests that we had in terms of gauging their feasibility. When trying to determine what alternatives might best fit our needs, we need to consider a number of questions. First, looking at operational feasibility, we should consider how well the business need is met by the solution. If we have a potential solution, but it doesn't really address the underlying root cause as well as other ones, then that's comparatively weak, and that should be taken into consideration. Will stakeholders embrace the solution on a permanent basis? This speaks to some of the organizational and cultural norms within the organization, but also potentially to the type of talents, philosophy, resources, and experience that these stakeholders have as well. If you're asking them to learn entirely new systems, different from what employees might have spent decades doing in the past, then you can be certain that you'll find some resistance here. That doesn't mean it's necessarily not worth pursuing, but it is certainly a cost of that alternative that must be taken into consideration. Further, what impact does the solution have on the organizational environment as a whole? If our solution is going to require a serious restructuring of the entire organization, then that can cause serious upheaval. Maybe we'll even lose some employees in the mix because they get tired of the changes or scared about job security and therefore leave to go elsewhere. In that case, we could leave ourselves depleted of some of our most valuable resources and unable to actually achieve the solution as we originally saw fit. How reliable, supportable, and sustainable will the solution be over the long term? Is it a patch? Is it something that's relatively cheap to implement now but might not continue to work later? Or is it a system that will be very difficult to maintain over a long period of time? We have to consider the total cost versus the total benefit over the long term and not just look at what the short-term benefit or cost might be. When it comes to technical feasibility, first, does the organization already have the technical capability to develop the solution in-house? If so, that's a tremendous positive in favor of that particular alternative. Can the needed technology be developed or procured, and how practically? Sometimes it might be as simple as buying a bit of new equipment that would be relatively affordable compared to the problem it would solve. In other cases, we might need to invent entire new processes and technologies, and this could be much more costly and difficult for us to undertake. Does the organization have, or can it obtain, the technical expertise necessary? This is an organizational question as much as a technical one. We need to understand the capabilities and talents of our own people, where their focuses and expertise might lie, where our strengths and weaknesses as an organization are, and so on. To what extent is the solution compatible or incompatible with existing technology? An alternative that might work very well in a vacuum, but could cause serious difficulty when we try to integrate it with other platforms, is not a very good solution at all. When it comes to cost effectiveness, at a high level, what are the initial and ongoing expenses that might be expected? And compared to the expected benefits, is the solution projected to be cost effective? We need to look at this in several different perspectives, not only for the percentage gain that might exist here or what we might expect from an absolute dollar standpoint, but rather a mix of both, understanding the practicalities of the capital that our business might have access to, but also want to keep in mind what that long-term benefit might be if a large investment might make sense. This leads to the third question, which is whether necessary funding can be acquired in order to implement the solution. Even if it makes a lot of sense to do, if we simply can't afford it or don't have access to it, then that alternative is effectively sealed off to us. These different questions should not be asked in a vacuum, nor should the assessment of each alternative take place independently. Instead, we should consider these options as compared to the current situation. What would the expected future be if no action is taken? And what would it mean if we went with one of the other options that we're looking at instead of this one? We should work with stakeholders in order to benefit from their insight in judging the true benefits and drawbacks of each approach. After all, typically those who are expected to use or interact with a solution on a daily basis will have a better perspective on what the daily challenges or benefits of each different solution might be. And by speaking to upper-level executives and those with a more strategic mindset, we can get a better grasp on how well the solution matches up with the company's long-term goals.